Hi, everyone. My name is Merran Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Energy Canada, and we're an initiative of Simon Fraser's Centre for Dialogue, and very pleased to be working with them. And I'm really pleased to see you all here this morning, so bright and early. Our first panel here is about renewable global trends, and we thought it was the big picture way to kick off the morning. Our panelists here come from near and far and have a very diverse background, and really an impressive depth of expertise. And with Shauna's exercise, I just counted up that we have over 150 years of expertise up here on the stage this morning. So if you're not awake, they're going to wake you up. Maybe I'll just give a quick run through of the format. Each presenter has 6 minutes, and I have a yellow card. And if you see me waving the yellow card, that's to tell them that they've got about 30 seconds left, and they have authorized me to kick them. That's why I'm in this chair.
Uh-oh.
At the 6-minute mark. You didn't hear that, Mark, but that's what they all agreed on. And that's so that we can actually get into the dialogue. And so we've trying to protect some time here at the end for questions and answers from the floor. So our panelists, I'm not going to read the long bio because you all have that amazing book that Michael Small just showed you, where you can read their full bio. So I'll just give you the rundown. I'm going to kick us off with a bit of the high story. Then we're going to have Harry Lehmann, the head of the Environmental Planning and Sustainability Strategies Division with the German Federal Environment Agency, down at the far end. He'll be followed by Dave Renné, who's the president of the International Solar Association, and then Marietta Sander, who's the director of the International Geothermal Association. You should wave so they know who you are, because I'm not going to repeat this. Then we have Rob Thornton, the president and CEO of the International District Energy Association. And last but not least, Mark Jacobson, the director of Atmosphere and Energy Program at Stanford University. So, as I said, I'm going to start with just 5 quick trends. And some of you, if you were there last night, you will have heard some of these. But just to create some context, so there was some great news last year from the International Energy Agency, and they reported out that carbon dioxide emissions plateaued from the energy sector, even though the economy was growing. And this is really the first time that this has happened. And they've attributed that to renewable energy and energy efficiency. And Mark is very excited about that. And it is exciting, but because it's actually showing that this is working and can work. So that's one significant factor. And $310 billion was invested last year in renewable energy and energy efficiencies. That actually was more than what was invested in fossil fuel electricity. And so we're really seeing a trend, the growing trend of building out the renewable side. And that takes us to our next point about solar and solar rising. So all that investment has been really driving down the price of solar. We heard a lot about it last night. And the installed cost of solar has actually gone down by 40%. The cost of a PV panel by 83%, but the installed cost down by 40%. And last year, enough PV was put on homes to power 21 million homes around the world. Now, you're going to see a bunch of names coming up here. These are 30 different countries that now solar is cheaper than residential electricity prices. So here we go. I guess I have to manually do this. Okay. And so that's the exciting news about solar, a really significant trend. Another exciting trend that we've seen this last year is batteries. And I know we've all seen Tesla come out with their announcement 2 weeks ago. And storage has been one of the conundrums in this, in our renewable energy revolution. And so the Tesla, what do I want to call it? The Gigafactory, thank you. You know what? When you see the next slide, you'll see it says it on it for me. Welcome to the Gigafactory. The Tesla Gigafactory that went up in Reno, Nevada, they really have started creating the foundation, literally creating the foundation, but creating the foundation for storage and building out storage, driving the prices down. So we've seen the price of lithium batteries come down by 40% over the last 5 years. And that curve that they're on is identical to what happened with solar PV. And they're predicting that the price of batteries will come down another 30% by 2017. And this is going to be a game changer, the game changer that we've all been waiting for, or one of them. Our fourth trend is about superpowers. The superpowers have really stepped up and started taking action. China and the US agreement meant that the United States is committed to reducing carbon pollution by 26 to 28% below 2005 levels. China has committed to halting the growth by 2030 and increasing renewables and nuclear. So again, a big trend, a big push that's going to, really increase the scale of commitment and is going to lead to new investments, and that's going to lead to new cost declines. And that's the last sort of trend that we're seeing, is we actually can really monitor this now, where you get policy leadership that leads to investment, and some of that $310 billion is invested into your jurisdiction. That creates price drops in technologies and in the cost of installing. And hopefully that leads back to more policy leadership. So we're seeing this cycle happening in countries, and we're seeing that taking action on climate change, taking action to 100% renewables is not just an environmental strategy, but it's an economic strategy. And that is exciting, because that's going to really bring more and more people on board. So that's my high-level overview, and now I want to turn it over to Harry. Thanks.
Yeah, good morning. Talking about status of renewables, I think talking about the status of the Energiewende in Germany is something which I'm honored to do here. And I try to start my clock. Yes, 6 minutes. Okay, let's go. We have to do it fast because there's a lot of things I want to tell to you. We started Energiewende 35 years ago. It was, as I already yesterday mentioned, started already in the 70s. We started in the 70s also funding institutions, research institutes, and all these things. The first windmills, which never ran, were produced, Grovian. A lot of scenarios were done, and in the end of the 70s, the German parliament started to discuss the climate change. There was so-called enquete commissions which studied is or is there not a climate change. And after the 70s, the 80s, were more and more time of improving renewable energies and also getting out of oil and coal, but a long discussion about nuclear. And these ended in the year 2000 with the first decision to phase out nuclear energy also in Germany. And it continued in the year after Fukushima, and we will have switched off all nuclear plants in 2022. This is the share of renewable energies in electricity consumption today. We started in the year 1990 with so-called electricity law for renewables. We continued with the feed-in tariff in the year 2000, and to be honest, this was the right instrument which moved in the renewable energy electricity in the German market. And before that, it was not really moving fast. On the other side, the feed-in tariff was also an incentive for industry, and we paid some money for learning curves for that, what you said, that industry had the possibility to sell on a secure market photovoltaic and wind energy on the prices you needed to install it. At the moment, we are looking at the instruments which we will use in the next years. We have a goal of 40 to 45% of renewables until 2025, 2030. We have this history made wind onshore, PV, and wind offshore in Germany the most cheapest carbon sequestration technology. So it's no nuclear, no anything else is cheaper than that, only energy efficiency in buildings and others. We have also talked about renewables, but on the other side, we had building codes and we had changing in mind of the people that efficiency is very important. And one of the important things, which from my point of view is a lot of technical development, is that the buildings in the year 1950 or even in the year 1970 needed 500 kilowatt hours per square meter in a year. And today we have so-called plus energy houses, or houses, passive houses and others, who are using only 30 of, which is 11 times less than 30 years ago, and the people are still living nicely and not having problems with that. A lot of people say that it is a burden for Germany, the Energiewende. That's not true. One of the very important things is that we developed during these 20 years 380,000 jobs in different industries, and Germany as an exporting country is very proud that a lot of these jobs is only dedicated to selling renewable energies in other parts of the world. It's not always selling the whole machine. Sometimes there are specialists who are able to sell glues or special metals and other things. So it's the whole bunch of all German industry. We have not a problem with prices. I will not enter the consumer price market of Germany, how it is constructed, but for that we need 2 hours to explain it. So, but in Germany, the wholesale price of electricity has fallen. We don't have any increase of electricity prices for the industry. Again, another story. So we have not a price problem in Germany. There are a lot of people saying something else. We as an agency are part of the monitoring. We are making the monitoring. So I'm convinced that my data are right. We are now in the second half time, and the second half time consists of 3 parts. First one is we have to reach our climate goals, which means until 2050 we want to go down with 80 to 95% of our greenhouse gas emissions. That means that we will to increase the renewables until 8% minimum in electric power, in total share 60%. We as an agency think that 100% is the right timing in 2050. That's the Parliament's view. Efficiency, we have to increase the efficiency in buildings and all the primary energy productivity. The main problem we have because of the existing infrastructure is to retrofit all these buildings. That is the slowest part of our Energiewende we have. Transport, I don't enter it now. This Energiewende has 3 pillars how to do that. The first one is increase our renewable energy sources. The second one is future grids. We don't have grids which are adapted to that future world. It means we have to have grids, we have to have an electrical management system, we have to have intelligent demand and supply management which fits with the volatile but predictable production of renewable energies from wind and photovoltaic. And last but not least, an equal energy efficiency. So we want to go for greenhouse gas neutral Germany. That is possible technically. We are discussing its technology, and this is what we are doing. Energiewende is, from our point of view, a chance for Germany because it ensures Germany's climate protection aims. Secondly, it creates jobs, and it will continue creating jobs. It leads to sustainable growth with national added value. You remember we are at the moment still one of the few countries which is increasing the export and cross-national product and all these things. It is partly because we are switching to renewables, because we are switching to, we have 1 second difference. Because we are trying to go into this new future. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, Harry. And now Dave Renné with the International Solar Agency.
Thank you, Merran, and good morning, everybody. The International Solar Energy Society, just by quick background, has been around for over 60 years, supporting the research and development of solar technologies from laboratory experiments to commercial success. Now the Society is serving as a voice of the transformation of the renewable energy system to a potential 100% renewable mix, and we're primarily focusing on the solar aspects of all of that. So let me make sure okay. And so what I plan to talk about this morning very briefly is to give a kind of a summary update of where we are with solar today and where we expect to be going in the near future. But before I do that, I just wanted to give a summary of where we are in the climate situation. There's a lot of information out there regarding this. This is one way of looking at the picture. This is a slide that comes out of the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report. And what the IPCC has done is to choose various types of scenarios called representative concentration pathways as to how can we get back to, or make sure that by the end of this century, we have not exceeded 2 degrees centigrade warming. And this slide has a lot of different ways of presenting the various scenarios that could take place. Currently, this is where we are in terms of carbon emissions since the pre-industrial times and the warming that's taken place. Nearly 1 degree centigrade warming has already occurred due to anthropogenic emissions. If we look into the future, business as usual could get us very far up into the 4 to 6 degrees centigrade warming, and that's, of course, the path we don't want to be on. The most stringent path, it's called RPC 2.6. The 2.6 relates to the climate forcing that takes place from carbon dioxide emissions, is by far the pathway we'd like to try to be on. This represents really a very modest, only allows for a modest increase in emissions over the next 20 years or so, and then a very dramatic decrease in emissions as the economy allows for that to take place. So it's a very big challenge we're all facing to even to stay at 2 degrees centigrade warming by the end of the century. So where does solar fit into all of this? Well, global capacity of solar technologies, and I'm focusing primarily on photovoltaic technologies, has grown dramatically over the last 20 years. I'm sure these are numbers you've all seen. This is coming out of last year's REN 21 Global Status Report. And by the end of 2013, the world had 139 gigawatts of installed solar capacity. And you can see the growth has really been quite remarkable, about 40 gigawatts per year. Now, their next report will be coming out in about another month, and we expect about another 40 gigawatts to be added by the end of 2014. And at the rates we're going now, we're going to be at more than 200 gigawatts of capacity by the end of this year. And so that's quite a dramatic growth, and also in terms of the trends that are taking place, there's going to be at least 50 megawatt or larger central solar station power plants around the world. So that's a big trend that's taking place that's really accelerating the growth of solar. At least 17 of those just came online in the past year or so. But it's important to note that rural, off-grid, and distributed solar is still a very important component of the energy mix, and that will also continue to grow as we go forward. And I should point out that 139 gigawatts, where we were back in 2013, represents about a displacement of about a quarter of a trillion megatons of carbon dioxide emissions. Which is actually relatively small. I hope I have those numbers right, but that's a relatively small contribution to the total carbon dioxide emissions that have to occur to follow that very stringent pathway I mentioned earlier. So where do we see as far as how solar is growing? It still represents only about 1% of the total electricity generation capacity around the world. And clearly we're going to need to scale that up dramatically even more. Well, first of all, how did we get to where we are today? Well, a very technical way of looking at that is a learning curve. These are learning curves for both thin film collectors as well as the crystalline silicon modules, which is the blue line. The thin film tends to be a little bit lower in cost, but also has slightly lower efficiencies. But in both cases, a learning curve is more than 20% drop in prices for every doubling of capacity that's been installed over the past 20 or 30 years. And that's expected to increase. The U.S. has a sunshot goal of 50 cents per watt of installed capacity for the modules. We're very close to that already. The sunshot goals that were set out to be achieved by 2017 are actually being achieved by 2015. So it's a very successful learning curve that's taking place. And along with that, studies such as done by Lawrence Berkeley National Lab show that the costs are decreasing. I think Merran mentioned this earlier, that coming down by about half since the late 1990s for both residential and commercial installations in the U.S. So we're seeing, along with the growth of the capacity, the drop in prices, and the third leg of the stool that besides the technology improvements that have taken place and the policies that are occurring to help stimulate the environment for installing PV is the financing, which is getting better and better all the time. And I think most important, and this is what a lot of this conference is all about, is that the community acceptance is there. Even the utility acceptance is coming around to accept these large penetrations of variable renewable energies. So in terms of the projections, here's a projection from the European Photovoltaic Industry Association. They see possibility of another doubling of capacity within just the next 3 or 4 years. Navigant shows an annual capacity projection going up to around 60 gigawatts per year by the end of this decade. So the growth is expected to continue, even though the cost drops may not be quite as significant as they have been recently. The IEA, looking out at the 2050, had 2 projections. One was back in 2010, where they thought up to 11% of the total capacity could be done by PV. Now they're even more optimistic. They see the possibility of 16% of our electricity supply from PV by the year 2050. And they also see a continued shift from residential to large-scale PV. So thank you, and you'll see announcements about our Congress coming up in Korea at the end of this year on the tables in the cafe, I believe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. That was fantastic, exciting news. And now the Executive Director of the International Geothermal Association, Marietta Sander.
Thank you very much. Very good morning to everybody of you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation to the organizers. I'm the Executive Director of the International Geothermal Association, so I'll be speaking about some case studies of geothermal energy. And I'll also be speaking about the International Renewable Energy Alliance, which was formed in 2004, which includes the 5 global international renewable energy associations. Dave Renné from the Solar Society is actually one of their partners, as well as the International Geothermal Association. Let me start. On this picture, you actually see some of the geothermal direct users already at the Blue Lagoon in Reykjavik, and the second other pictures, or the ones in the center, show you some filtration systems of geothermal applications in Germany. And on the right-hand side, you see a geothermal hot spring in Uganda. So I'll start with some trends on geothermal energy on a global scale. And I'll show you the world map with the 5 top countries who are producing most of the geothermal power. These include the US, Indonesia, the Philippines, Mexico, and New Zealand. And you see the map down at the bottom, which shows where most of the geothermal power is produced in other countries. On the top right, you see a graph with the geothermal direct use applications, and this is just to emphasize that heating and cooling is actually very important for geothermal energy, and it can be used, and it is used in many countries, such as Iceland, and the Nordic countries, such as in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, in Germany. So heating and cooling is a very important component, how geothermal energy can be used in urban settings, especially looking at heat pumps and district heating systems. In Germany alone, more than 230 district heating systems are supported and supplied with geothermal energy. Let's move to the next slide. The Drake Landing community in Canada, it's one of the case studies which I want to present to you, where geothermal and solar energy are working together to heat and cool buildings. Geothermal is actually used, or the heat is actually stored in the steeper subsurface during the summertime, and then used in the wintertime by this community. The system is applied in the Drakeland community, and it supports about 52 houses with space heating and with water. So this is just one of the examples where geothermal energy can be used in combination with others. Now I brought you some examples from Germany, actually from the North Rhine-Westphalia area, which is close to the cities of Dortmund and Düsseldorf. And these are three examples that I briefly want to present to you. Some of you find this brochure on their tables as well, where a lot more information is displayed on these three projects. On the left-hand side, you see the mine shaft of the Robert Musse, where geothermal energy is actually used by using mine water. Mine water is pumped to the surface in this area anyway, because it needs to be done, because otherwise subsidence or upliftment occurs. And this mine water has a temperature between 20 and 25 degrees. It's pumped to the surface, and it heats schools in this case, schools, a fire station, a swimming pool, and other facilities. So this is a very good example how geothermal energy can be used in an urban setup. On the center picture, you see a building which is called the Exenter House in the city of Bochum. It used to be a bunker in the Second World War, and it was now converted to offices. It has 5,000 square meters and 15 floors of office space, and it's heated and cooled with geothermal borehole heat exchangers in the deeper subsurface. So this is another example where geothermal energy can be used in an urban setup. And on the right-hand side, you actually see a few photos which display the International Geothermal Center, which is located in Bochum in Germany, also in the same area. The IGA, the International Geothermal Association's headquarters, is actually in one of those buildings. And over here, what's interesting is that the team over there used an innovative drilling technique, which is called the GeoStar, where you use only one central drilling platform, and you drill several boreholes. And also in this case, geothermal energy is used for heating and cooling the office building as well as the other facilities. This brings me to Denmark, to the Sonderburg municipality, where the Sonderburg municipality tries to achieve 100% renewable energy target by 2029. They installed the Project Zero project, and together with geothermal energy and other renewable energy forms, they're trying to achieve this. Geothermal is actually used together with the wood chip plant to supply combined heat and power, to supply the district heating network over there, with additional power through gas turbines and waste incineration. So that shows you an example of Denmark. And now I would like to speak a bit about the International Renewable Energy Alliance, an alliance of 5 international renewable energy associations, which include you see that their logos on the bottom floor. They include the World Bioenergy Association, the Hydropower Association, us from the Geothermal Association, ICES, the Solar Energy Society, and the World Wind Energy Association. On the right-hand side, you see what we do. We're working together with the UN bodies, with the International Labour Organization. We advise at the UNFCCC negotiations, and we're doing a lot of awareness raising during conferences and other events. And with that, we're trying to display that a combination, a symphony of renewables is actually needed to change urban setups and municipal heating and power generation technologies. So our aims are to advance policy, to bridge the gap between policy and practice. And with the case studies which I showed you from Denmark, from Germany, and from the Drakeland community in Canada, this is one of the means or one of the outcomes of the Renné Alliance activities. This I want to close, and thank you very much. Some of the brochures, please pick one up if you want to know more about geothermal in the urban systems, and I also left some of our flyers on the tables below. Thank you.
Thanks, Marietta. And I'm just going to note that there's pens and paper on your tables, so if you do have questions that come to mind when we get to the question session, if you want to jot down your questions for the earlier speakers so that Rob and Mark don't get all the questions. And so next up we have Rob Thornton. He's the president and CEO of the International District Energy Association. Rob.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Thornton. I'm with the IDEA. We were formed in 1909. We're now in our 106th year. It's great to be here in Vancouver. I'm from Boston. We had all the winter, you didn't. This is a typical power plant. This one happens to be in the UK, but this is our electricity generation. This is what it looks like every day. And in the US, our electricity system is in need of renewal. About 2/3 of the energy that goes in is dumped as waste heat. That really is both a challenge and an opportunity. In fact, 36% of the energy consumed in the US is waste heat. It's our dirty little secret. But let's chart that another way. If we look at the energy waste from our power plants, it's equal to or greater than the total energy consumed in every country on the planet except for 3. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of opportunity here. It really is quite large. I'm going to share with you a case in point. In fact, this is Brayton Point, a power plant south of Boston, near where I grew up. It began operating in 1964. I watched it being built. Since its beginning, it's been dumping its heat into Mount Hope Bay. A lot of heat. When you make electricity, oftentimes first you make heat. This plant has been taking the cooling out of the river, dumping it in the bay. 37 trillion BTUs a year. If you were to put that heat in a pipe with a meter, it would be worth over $400 million a year. So this plant, for the last 50 years, has exhausted about $20 billion worth of useful energy. Just to give you some perspective. A few years back, the prior owners decided they would comply. This plant has been under litigation for a lot of years. Finally, they said, okay, we're going to comply with the Clean Water Act, and we're going to build cooling towers for the cost of $570 million. So they can, instead of exhausting the heat into the bay, they'll exhaust it into the sky. Now, if you live by the plant, this investment hadn't really done a lot for your value, but it didn't do a lot for the value of the plant either. Those owners ended up selling the plant, writing it down by $780 million, and now the new owners actually can't make it work either. They can't get a forward capacity market. The plant is slated to close, and this is not the story of Obama and the EPA, ladies and gentlemen. This is inefficiency in action. There's another way. You take the heat, you put it in a pipe, and you can actually heat cities with it. This plant outside of Copenhagen is arguably the most efficient plant on the planet. Every year, 90% of the energy is useful. This plant was originally coal and gas, and now it's going to be completely biomass. So you can convert an entire city by converting one plant. Copenhagen, frankly, is, I think, one of the world leaders when it comes to district energy and district heating. They made an investment in a heating transmission network back in the 80s that was roughly equivalent to the cost of those 2 cooling towers. They connected 18 cities, and now they transmit the heat all around the community, not wasting it. And a few years back, Copenhagen looked like the US, or Denmark looked like the US with central station power plants. Well, today, they have the CHP chicken pox. It's everywhere. Every community has really a local combined heat and power plant. They're using the heat, very efficient. And this thermal network is the backbone of Denmark's efficiency position. Using the heat creates tremendous opportunity. It's not all bad news. In Boston, actually in Cambridge, we have a power plant, 256 megawatts. It's on the Charles River, same to Brayton Point, exhausting heat into the river. It's located right by MIT. And luckily, it's also near a district heating network, both in Cambridge and Boston. So the new owners of this plant have made a big investment. They actually put a pipe connecting the plant, taking the heat out of the river, as we say in Boston, river. Not an insignificant investment, but now that heat is used to heat buildings in Boston. Now the environmental payoff is substantial. They've cut the emissions by 475,000 tons a year, equivalent to 80,000 vehicles, or 600 football fields of PV. That's the environmental gain of just using the heat, displacing downstream fossil. It's a significant environmental gain. So the good news is we're seeing a paradigm shift from central station to more distributed generation, driven in fact by extreme weather. Superstorm Sandy, polar vortex. We've had really, California, Texas on fire. And Superstorm Sandy was a galvanizing moment in the Northeast. I'm from Boston. We dodged the bullet. But in fact, it's gotten the attention of mayors. Where our systems stood up to Sandy were the district energy systems in Princeton and NYU and Brooklyn. So now mayors want an integrated thermal and electric grid. They want the resiliency and the reliability of district energy. Now, when you have a thermal grid in your city, you aggregate the cooling and heating loads of many buildings, and that creates an opportunity to do things like use lake water cooling in Toronto. The big investment, not insignificant. They take water, 34-degree water from the lake to cool 75 buildings in downtown Toronto. The city, though, recently sold their share and made a nice profit of $104 million. Public sector investment, private entrepreneurs now taking forward. And what's important is cooling is at least half the demand of a typical building. The orange is the camel hump. If you're an electric utility provider, this is the bad cholesterol, electric demand. When you have district cooling, you have a flat pool table of demand. Your building becomes flat as a pancake. This is particularly important in places like Dubai, where air conditioning is 70% of the electricity produced. And all of these buildings are on district cooling because they don't have the grid or the generation to tie all that load on the wires. They invested in district cooling and have 67 plants in Dubai with a total of over 1 million tons of air conditioning in 8 years. The good news is, and I'll finish up, the UN has gotten wind of district energy, and they have produced a terrific report. I brought copies. They're in the Chartwell room. 45 cities that are moving forward with district energy, and the UN is keen to help cities look at their own objectives. You know, energy is a very local issue. Sometimes it's carbon, sometimes it's jobs, sometimes it's resiliency, and you have to sort of play to your strength or your game. And there are some strategies that we've developed, and we're sharing those with the C40 and USDN, so you don't reinvent the wheel. And I'm going to conclude. The good news is, finally, heating and cooling is on the agenda in Washington. Now, not a lot's getting done in Washington, but our Clean Power Plan is setting the table. And in fact, if you look at these nifty titles, Heat Act, Power Act, BTU Act, the good news is they're talking about thermal energy, and we have some, I think, some optimism. At the provincial and state level, very positive movement for CHP and district energy, but the game is really local. And in Massachusetts, now here in Vancouver, you've got terrific local leadership that's really galvanizing the market, supporting investment, and I think you're in good hands with a solid future. And you're looking at district energy as your primary, I think, a carbon strategy. In Massachusetts, we also want to unlock the potential of combined heat and power and microgrids so that we can sell that power to the grid, get a fair price, and really revolutionize the market. And we're holding a conference end of June in Boston. I would invite all of you to join us, where we'll be talking about these local policies and how to teach, learn, and advance all of that. IDA will also be coming back to Vancouver in December. I imagine the weather won't be as nice as it is now. We're bringing the IEA, the International Energy Agency, experts from around the world in district heating, combined heat and power from Denmark, Finland. I invite you to join us. And I'm going to close with this, I think, pretty salient remark. So thank you so much for your hospitality. And I went long, but thank you. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Rob. That was very inspiring. And so next up, we have Mark Jacobson. He's the director of the Atmosphere and Energy Program at Stanford University. Mark. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to expand today on my talk last night, which was on these plans to develop and actually get implemented 100% clean energy plans for all 50 United States and now 139 countries of the world. And at the end of the talk, I'll show a website where at least the 50 state plans are all available. They're pretty final. They'll be published within a couple months in a journal called Energy and Environmental Science. The 139 plans for the countries will be rolled out over the next several months, hopefully all before the Paris conference. So the idea here, again, is to transform the energy infrastructure of every state and country to 100% clean renewable energy. And that's clean because there are some renewable energies that are not clean, and I won't name them here, but the clean is wind, water, and solar. And it's all sectors. So electricity is one of several sectors, and it accounts for maybe 20% of all energy worldwide. So well, we're trying to transform transportation, heating, cooling, and industry simultaneously. In 2010, the world power demand end use from all these sectors, and that's after transmission distribution losses, what people actually use was about 13 terawatts, and it's expected to go up to 22 terawatts in 2050. But if we do this conversion on a worldwide scale, because of the efficiency of electricity primarily, you get a power demand reduction of on the order of 33%. Well, about 6 percentage points of that is due to end-use energy efficiency improvements, and the rest is the efficiency of electricity. And most of that benefit is in transportation, although you do get it also in power as well, as was just discussed. But for example, when you have an electric car, the plug-to-wheel efficiency is between 80 to 86%. So 80 to 86% of the electricity goes to move the car. The rest is waste heat. With an internal combustion engine, it's on the order, on average, of about 17 to 20% tank-to-wheel efficiency. So you have about 80% losses of energy as heat. And so you actually reduce your energy demand by a factor of 4 to 5 just by electrifying your transportation fleet. And as a result, the cost of electricity to drive electric cars is on the order of 80 cents a gallon equivalent in the United States compared to around $4 for gasoline, although that's changed recently. But you'd save, so the average consumer would save around $20,000 in fuel costs driving an electric car 15,000 miles per year for, 15,000 miles per year for 15 years. So this, if you go across all sectors, you get about, say, 27% reduction in power demand just from electricity efficiency worldwide. In the US, it's higher because there's a higher fraction of transportation. And now, we did 50 plans for 50 states, and these would be by 2050. Hey, that rhymes, doesn't it? But the idea is we transform each state. So we did plans for each state individually, and then sum the results. And this shows the land area required. And the overall plan would be about 19% of the total end-use energy would be powered by offshore wind, about 31% by onshore wind. So 50% of the US would be powered by wind overall. And on the order of 45% solar, so it's 38% in PV plus CSP power plants, most of that's in PV power plants, about 7.2% rooftop solar. Now you might say, oh, we should do more rooftop. Well, this actually accounts for covering about 70% of all south-facing roofs in the United States, including parking structures and other types of schools that structures, canopies that don't even exist yet. So you just don't have enough buildings actually to power, because we're talking about all sectors, not just electricity. We're trying to power all sectors. But you can get around 7% of your end-use energy from rooftop solar. You can probably squeeze out a couple more percent if possible. If we can do more, if you can cover all the freeways and highways with solar, with canopies on top of them, you can probably get a bit more. But you do have a lot of desert area, so it's not necessary to cover rooftops entirely. Geothermal is about 1.2%. There are 13 states that have significant geothermal resources in the US. There are others that have potential, but right now it's really costly to go in those states. So if we can get more, that would be great. Hydroelectric would be about 2.8%, and that's not increasing the hydroelectric capacity. It's just the capacity factor, though, would increase. So the idea would be to try to use existing hydros more efficiently, but not to grow it, maybe except in Alaska. Now, the footprint on the ground for this plan, how much land is actually taken up on the ground, new land, is less than half of 1% of the US. It's about 0.4%. That's mostly for the solar, PV, and CSP. In addition, you need spacing between wind turbines onshore, and that's about 1.7% of the US, but that can be used for multiple purposes, such as farming and ranching and grazing land and open space. So the total land use is not big, and this does not account for eliminating the entire infrastructure for the fossil fuel industry, including all gas pipelines, refineries, wells, nuclear plants, and other types of infrastructure. Now, of course, people ask, can you actually keep the grid reliable? And so what we did is we developed these plans for all 50 states, and we calculated the number of different wind turbines and solar panels that we need in 2050, and all the other technologies. And then my main work is building and applying climate and air pollution computer models. And so I put all the wind turbines in a global climate model and all the solar panels. And the model actually takes each turbine and extracts the kinetic energy from the wind, converts it to electricity. And so when you have, for the US, you need about 500,000 5-megawatt wind turbines to power 50% of the US. And each turbine competes with each other turbine for the kinetic energy. So you have to account for that, because otherwise you overestimate how much wind is actually available. And so I was able to do this and simulate time-dependent wind production output, putting the turbines in each state, and calculated every 30 seconds what was the power supply from all the wind over a 6-year period, and did the same with solar, because when you put solar, the solar panels extract solar radiation, convert that up to electricity, so actually change the temperature of the roofs, and that's accounted for in the model, and that feeds back to the climate. And so we got solar output every 30 seconds. And so then we had estimated every 30 seconds the power demand in 2050 in different sectors, heating, cooling, electric power, and we combined that with the production with the demand, plus we added storage from concentrated solar power, the existing hydroelectric, pumped hydro, lots of soil storage, and storage in ice and in water and for heat and cooling, and other types of low-cost storage. We did not use batteries at all, but this shows a result that we were able to match power demand every 30 seconds for 6 years with zero loss of load. The top shows the average monthly value, and the bottom shows hourly values for 4 specific days. So it's possible to match power demand, we believe, with 100% wind, water, solar for all purposes without any loss of load. So that's no longer a reason to state that we can't do this transition, this is the most common complaint that people have about large-scale renewable energy, is the inability of the intermittent wind and solar to match power demand. The lights will go off. This is not the case, we believe, if you do this smartly, combining the energy with low-cost storage, demand response, some hydrogen, which is also included. The transition timeline, we try to get 80% conversion by 2030, 100% by 2050. This requires changes starting today. We proposed this to our governor of California. We did a specific plan for California. We proposed it in October. Governor Brown adopted 60% of our plan. By January, he says California is going 50% renewable energy by 2030. And so that's a step, but we really need to go even faster. Finally, just to summarize these plans, we'd reduce power demand in the US, in this case, 36%. We'd eliminate 63,000 air pollution deaths per year. That costs $500 billion per year. Climate costs are, from US emissions alone, by 2050 are estimated at $3.3 trillion. These externality costs, they sum to 17 cents per kilowatt hour, just the externality costs from fossil fuels. That's all across all sectors. That's greater than the 13 cents a kilowatt hour by a factor of almost, so same or higher than the 13 cents a kilowatt hour, the average electricity price in the US. We create 4.5 million construction jobs, 2.2 million operation jobs by losing 4 million jobs. It would require only 0.5% of US land area for footprint, 1.7% for spacing. The cost of the entire system with storage, with demand response, with long-distance transmission is between 11 and 12 cents a kilowatt hour. With the wind, water, solar system, you'd stabilize energy prices. You have upfront barriers, upfront cost barriers, transmission needs, of course, lobbying and politics, but materials are not limits. And then finally, if you're interested in more information, the actual plans are at that website that's given there. You can go to the solutionsproject.org. There's an infographic. You can click on a state, up comes a plan for that state, and we'll have infographics for the 139 countries coming before the end of the year. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. That was fantastic. Now, I'm feeling a lot of hope after this panel and their presentations. I think we have time. We're a little behind schedule for 2 questions, a couple of questions from the floor. I believe there's some mics out here that people will be in the crowd. So if you've got a question, maybe you can put up your hand. Harry.
This is a problem we had also in Germany, because if you think about North Rhine-Westphalia, it was a coal-producing center of Germany in the last 150 years. And it is clear that you will lose jobs at a certain place, and that every time in history or in the development of technologies and economy happened. But if you start early, transforming from the old-fashioned nuclear and fossil jobs to the new-fashioned, then you will solve the problem partly. Second thing is, every study about the job effects of fossil and nuclear compared to renewables shows that you produce more jobs with renewables than with fossil and nuclear. But it is distributed differently over the country. So the right answer would be that that region start to answer themselves, what is their role? And in North Rhine-Westphalia, it's one of the parts of Germany where a lot of initiatives are happening to convert the existing fossil fuel jobs to new jobs in the renewable energy or energy efficiency field. It doesn't work every time, but if you start early, then you have new companies, new initiatives in that region.
Great, thank you. So I noticed that our mayor's here and would like to say a few words, so we're gonna have to wrap up. You can tweet your questions. The information's here to Pound Renewable Cities, and we will get the answers back to you today. We'll be hounding the panelists to make sure that they're responded to. So I just want to give a big round of applause to this panel, and thank you very much.